All right, let's get into the topic of the day in college athletics. And it's really not just the topic of the day. I think you could argue it is the topic of the week, the topic of the month, really the topic of the last several years. As last Thursday, July 1st, for the first time ever, college athletes were able to benefit off of their name, image, likeness. If you're listening to this right now, you know what that means. For the first time ever, last Thursday, July 1st, athletes were able to sign endorsement deals with companies and get paid above board to be a college athlete. We have seen what has happened the last couple days, and I think overall it's been really good for college athletics. Kids have been able to sign up for Cameo. Some of the bigger name players have signed up for kind of local endorsement deals. De'Ara King in Miami is kind of leading the charge on that one. And on top of that, some truly kind of high-profile female athletes have signed national endorsement deals. The two twin basketball players from Fresno State that are female, and the female gymnast Livy Dunn from LSU, which I talked about on Thursday's Aaron Torres podcast. They seem to be really raking in the money. So we are about 4, 5, 6 days into the name, image, likeness era right now, depending on when you're listening to this. And I think overall it's been really good for college sports. What it has also done, though, it has created a very interesting conversation about what do we do with all of those previous NCAA rules violations, which almost all centered around extra benefits? You go through the history of college athletics, basically every major scandal had something to do with extra benefits. Whether it was, the Fab Five at Michigan, whether it was Kentucky basketball back in the day with Chris Mills, Miami football with Nevin Shapiro. You go on and on and on down the list. And a lot of people are asking, Johnny Manziel is a good example. Should we still be punishing? Should we still hold it against these athletes for what they did 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago now that the rules have changed? The rules that they broke are no longer rules. And so I think that's a layered conversation. It's a detailed conversation. It's a complicated conversation. I think every individual case will be an interesting conversation in and of itself. But the case I want to talk about today, to me, is essentially a no-brainer. It surrounds Reggie Bush, 2005 Heisman Trophy winner, beating his former teammate Matt Leinart, beating Vince Young that year in what was a truly iconic season in college football. Reggie Bush wins the Heisman Trophy, but we find out later that rules violations have happened, and the trophy gets taken away. And when NIL went into effect this week, Reggie Bush basically said, look, I have stayed quiet for long enough. I have served my punishment. I believe that I deserve my Heisman Trophy back. And let me just say this. I am in total agreement with Reggie Bush. Get that man his Heisman Trophy back. A little bit of backstory. I know you know the backstory. You wouldn't be listening if you didn't. But some quick details. Essentially, Reggie Bush, as I just said a moment ago, he was the most electric player in college football of his era. And I think you can legitimately argue one of, if not the most electric players in the history of the sport. It's amazing. We're in 2021, 16 years removed from his time at USC, and you still have kids who commit to USC and say it's because of Reggie Bush. We're now at the point where kids aren't even old enough to remember watching Reggie Bush play at USC, but they've seen him on YouTube, they've seen the highlights, and he remains one of the most iconic college football players in the history of the sport. And if you don't believe me, the numbers back up that he was absolutely incredible. Went back and looked it up for fun. This was a guy who in his junior year, and remember, this was pre-spread offense, this was pre-whatever, this was pre-tempo, this was pre-80, 90 plays a game for the best college football teams, the best offenses. This guy rushed for 1,700 yards as a junior, including almost 9 yards per carry, 37 catches out of the backfield for almost 13 yards per catch. Just for fun, he added a punt return for a touchdown as well, and deservedly won the Heisman Trophy that year. Just one problem. 2, 3, 4 years later, we find out that during his time at USC, NCAA rules violations had been broken. His parents took some money from an agent to get a condo in San Diego, where he's originally from. If you read the NCAA report, and I did it back in the day, there were questions about his car, where it came from, all sorts of stuff. But when it happened, the NCAA believed that they had enough to punish Reggie Bush, to vacate all of the wins from that time frame and from that era. And in conjunction with the Heisman Trophy Trust, the people that hand out the Heisman Trophy, they took Reggie Bush's Heisman Trophy away. Earlier this week, Reggie Bush says, I want it back. The Heisman Trust says, look, you got to talk to the NCAA. We're following their rules. If the NCAA says it's cool to give it back, we will give it back. And I believe that time is now to give Reggie Bush his Heisman Trophy back. Now, what's interesting is, I will say this. I don't think there's a lot of people at this point that don't believe that Reggie Bush should have his Heisman Trophy, but there are still some, and I will say in their defense, I do understand their argument. Their argument is pretty simple. I don't think there's very many people left out there, but the argument is you broke the rules. The rules were what they were when they existed, and if you broke the rules at that time, you have to be punished, and you have to serve a punishment for it. And so if that's your argument, like I can't really disagree with you on that, because that's always been my stance. I remember even dating back 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, whatever it was, when Todd Gurley got caught signing autographs for money, when Johnny Manziel got caught signing autographs for money. I sat there and said, you could say it's a stupid rule, but you broke the rules. You have to pay a punishment. You know what the rules were. You knew you would get in trouble if you got caught, and you have to serve a punishment independent of whether you think the rule is dumb or not. I've always used the example, if you're going 67 in a 65 and you get pulled over, it might be stupid to get a ticket, but you did get a ticket, and you should get a ticket because you knew the speed limit was 65. As it pertains to Bush, though, I would say this. If you want to argue that he needs to serve a punishment, okay, that's fine. I won't fight you on it. But here's my counter to that. The man has served his punishment, okay? Think about what he has gone through in the last 10 years since this first came out in 2010. Never forget that he actually was basically banned from USC athletics kind of under the bylaws of the then NCAA for 10 years. This was a guy that could not go to USC games. They could not acknowledge him. I might be mistaken on this, but I seem to remember a story where Fox Sports, who obviously, yes, I do Fox Sports Radio. I don't know how the TV side of things works, but I seem to remember a story where Fox Sports wanted to broadcast from a USC game, and USC could not acknowledge Reggie Bush on the scoreboard in the stadium during that time because by rule, they had to have a 10-year disassociation with him where they basically couldn't acknowledge him. So don't tell me the guy hasn't served his punishment because he had his Heisman Trophy taken away. The every stat that he has was stricken from the record books. Every win during his junior year was stricken from the record books. And he was disassociated with USC for 10 years. If I could take it a step further, USC was punished as well. They got a 2-year postseason ban. They had a massive scholarship loss that put them in the hole that they're still finally trying to dig out of a little bit. I'm not saying Lane Kiffin was the answer at USC because I think he was young and I think he did a lot of things silly that even he admits now he shouldn't have done. But he did win the Pac-12 South in his second year. He did win the division title in his second year. And then the scholarship sanctions hit, he fell apart and all that stuff. But I just bring it up to say, so don't tell me that Reggie Bush has not been punished and USC has not been punished because they have been. No one said this had to be a lifetime punishment for breaking NCAA rules, yet that's essentially what the NCAA and the Heisman Trust are saying. What I would finally say, and I've talked about this before, and it does pertain to the NCAA rules and the Heisman Trophy. Think about this. This will blow your mind, and I've said it on my podcast before. I've said it on every time I talk about Reggie Bush. I live about 25 minutes from USC. USC's campus is 25 or so minutes from where I am sitting right now. When you go to USC's campus, they have what is called Heritage Hall, which is basically their athletics hall of fame. Great facility. If you're on the USC campus, I encourage you to go check it out. USC has an incredible athletics tradition, baseball, football, Olympic sports, whatever. You go on and on down the list of all the great athletes that have come through USC. It's incredible. Randy Johnson played there. Obviously, all the football players. But the centerpiece of Heritage Hall is all of the Heisman trophies won by all of USC's players. And, of course, there, Reggie Bush's Heisman cannot be displayed because it got taken away from him. Just one problem. You know whose Heisman Trophy is there, besides Matt Leinert's, besides Charles White's? O.J. Simpson's Heisman Trophy is still on display at USC. And so let's put aside, let's get off our high horse. I understand rules were broken. I believe that Reggie Bush should have been punished based on breaking the rules that existed at the time. But it was never supposed to be a lifetime punishment. And if the Heisman Trophy Trust can acknowledge O.J. Simpson, if the NCAA can acknowledge O.J. Simpson as the best college football player in his final year at USC, if USC can display O.J. Simpson's Heisman, then we got to give Reggie Bush his Heisman back. Again, I don't know about every NCAA infractions case. I'm not saying we have to just wipe the record books clean and no one ever broke rules, but it feels like Reggie Bush has served his punishment. He has served his time. It is time to give him back his Heisman Trophy. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a quick favor. Make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, make sure to follow me on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram. And, of course, subscribe to the Aaron Torres Podcast, where I'm talking college athletics 24 hours a day, 352 weeks a year, basically.